have a course on Udemy called Master Power Automate Expressions in 2 Hours. That course is all about working with expressions, JSON, parsing the content, and working with every single node that you have inside the internal messages that goes from one action to another action inside Power Automate. Regardless, the question that I got from Julian, one of my students, I put it on the screen, but bottom of the story is that he says, okay, you're telling all these things, but can you show us how you yourself process a complex request like this that he actually was kind enough to send me the original file that he's trying to process. And he asked me to show an example of how I go through an actual request and process it and turn it into a CSV or an Excel sheet. And here we go with this question. I thank Julian, and I would like you to go to the comments and thank him for providing the question and also the material so that I can go through it without any hassle. Now let's get to work. Let's start with the complex JSON that I received for this video. The JSON file is just one object, opening and closing curly bracket, God's sake, okay, here. And inside it, there are a few elements that starts from, you know what, forget about it. I don't have nerves to do that. I just copy it and I open it in JSON Beautifier. Here. So if I go to Code Beautify, I can just copy and paste it here. And if I click on Tree View, it gives me all the properties that I have in this object. So I have ID, status, provider name, date, time, UTC, which none of them really matters. But under that, I have something called invoices. Invoices is an array of 76 elements, and each one of them is a separate invoice. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to convert these invoices to a CSV file. There was no point of really going through all the elements inside this JSON object. I just picked a few of them, type, invoice ID, invoice number, and all these things, you can see them here. So you have type, invoice ID, invoice number, and blah, blah, blah. But there are a few elements as of arrays, like, for example, payments, credit notes, and all those things. I cannot really flat them out in a CSV file, so I just skip it at the moment. But to show you how I work with the arrays, I take it to the next level, and I pick one item called contact. Contact is not an array, but inside contact, which is an object by itself, if I expand it, there are 7 members inside it, and one of them is phones. For this specific one, phones is empty, but I want to get some contact information like contact name, contact ID, and contact phones. So if you really look into that one, other than all these basic fields, I have contact ID, contact name, contact phones, and the others are all at the same level of the invoice object. Let's start the work. To do that, I go back to flow.microsoft.com and I click on Create. And as simple as it sounds, I create an instant flow and I call it complex JSON parse. I pick manually trigger a flow and I click on Create. So my flow is created. I just need to bring all that object inside this flow. I really don't want to call it from anywhere else. To keep it simple, I create a variable, initialize variable, and I call it invoices object. And as the name says, okay, let me just rename this properly. Rename, and I paste it here. Type, it's an object, so I call it an object. I go back here and I copy the entire object from here. Copy. And I bring it back inside Power Automate and I click on the value and I just paste it here. If it doesn't respond, don't worry, because it's a huge object and it takes a while for Power Automate to really validate it. We're good. Let me just scroll up to the top of the page and I just close it. And again, closing it takes a few seconds. Great. So now if I go back here, you see we decided that we really don't need ID status and all those things, but we need to have direct access to these invoices. So I go back to the Power Automate flow. I click on Add New Step, and I want to create another variable. And this variable should only hold invoices, and the type has to be an array. So I call it invoices here. So these are the actual invoices. I just rename it and done. Type, this time, obviously it's going to be an array, but to get to this array, I need to get this element of the entire object. To do that, I come back here, I click on the values, I click on expression, and I start writing variable, and I open the bracket, and I need to provide the variable name. And that variable name is going to be invoices object. This name, the name of the variable that we created. And then inside it, I need to refer to dot, and this is the name, invoices. So if I just paste it here, it gets this variable, which is invoices object, and I get the invoices element out of the entire message that I received probably from a service, and I put it inside an array. I don't need any casting conversion or anything else because invoices by itself is an array. Here, this is square bracket, and it shows you it's an array. Great. So let me go back here and I click on OK. And let's save and test it. So I click on test. I'll perform the trigger action, click on test, run flow, done. So now if I go to initialize invoices, you will see I have an array of objects. Fantastic. Now, let's go back and continue because now I need to convert this array to something like a CSV structure. But before doing that, I need to have a simplified version of this JSON array. To do that, I'm using select. So let me click on edit. I don't need this guy anymore. I click on new step and I use select. Select can convert one JSON format to another JSON. So when I want to pick the values from the initialized invoices, I click on here and I get the values from invoices. Remember, this one was the array. Select, and now I need to map it. For mapping, I can simply provide the field and values from the previous arrays, which is actually navigated through for every single item, and I can bring the values here. Let's start with one of them. If I go back to my Excel sheet, the first element that I want here is going to be type. So let me go back to flow. So I say type. And for the value, I need to get the type of the current item. Let me take a look here. So the current item is going to be something like here. And the type is what I need for every current item that is being processed by this select. So here, I click on expression because I have to write expression here. So I would say item. We put the brackets, dot type. I click OK. Done. So the first element is added here. You can see type is added. Second one is invoice ID that I need to add here. So great. Let me copy it here. Now I want to show you my skills in copying and pasting. Paste. I go back here. For the second one, I need to get this invoice ID. So basically, I'm looking for a property called invoice ID of the current item, which is exactly at the root level of this invoice object. I go back here. Just like before, expression, and I say item, which refers to the current item that is being processed in JSON expressions, dot, and I put invoice ID here. Okay, I'm good. Is there anything else? Invoice number maybe? Okay, let's do this one too. I go back here, invoice number, and if I go back again to expression, I can get the current item, which again, I refer to that by item, dot, invoice number, just to make sure that the invoice number matches the field that I have in the actual JSON. Great. So on and so forth. I really don't want to dig into the details of it. You can continue with the other fields. Let me just save it and test it and see what we get out of this select. Test, run flow, done. So basically, at the moment, if I expand this select, the output is an array that contains type, invoice ID, invoice number, and everything else to the end. Fantastic. Now, how can I convert it to CSV? Piece of cake. So close the select, new step, and I search for CSV. Parse CSV is encoding. This is not what we need, but create CSV table. I can simply click on it, and I can say, just get it as the output from select. Output from select. Done. Save. And I can test it. Run flow. Done. So this CSV is what I got. Type, invoice ID, invoice number, and blah, blah, blah. I can simply save it in a simple file, and I have a CSV representation of all those records. But let's go back to the sweet part. I examined this JSON, and I realized that for all of them, the phone is empty. So basically, phones is empty. Let me just put some dummy values here. For example, I would say 1, 2, 3, comma. Another element is going to be maybe another number, and maybe another number. I want to show you how you can concatenate all these elements and add it to the phones field inside that JSON. So I come back here. Under select, oh gosh, I got to click on edit. So click on select, expand it. One thing that I want to pick up now is going to be contact ID maybe. Let me just add them so we can have a reference to them. Oh, I didn't include the invoice number. Great. Okay, invoice number, item, click on expression again. I call it item, just like before, dot invoice number. I click on OK. So invoice number is selected. Contact ID, same thing. So I look for, again, on the expression tab, I look for item, which refers to current item, and I say dot, come back here. Contact ID is not directly under the object. So the invoice object has a property called contact. We need to refer to this one first. So I come back here, and then dot. Inside contact, I have something called contact ID, which I need to get it here and add it to the other one. So now I have the contact ID, which is inside the contact object. Let me click OK, and we test it and see what we get out of it. And then I will take it to the next level. Test, test, run flow, done. So if I expand the create CSV table now, you see I have the contact ID as well. So invoice number, which is this one, and contact ID is a weird GUID file, GUID field, which doesn't really matter at the moment. Now, I need to do the same thing with phones, but phones is not just single string. Phones is an array that we need to convert it to string. Now let's see how we can do that. I come back here, again, click on edit. I call it contact, phone, and here. I need to get the contact phone. So just like before, I click on expression. I start writing item dot. What I'm looking for is under contact. So I write contact dot. Under contact, I have phones. So object, contact, and I have phones here. So I pick that phone here. This one returns an object, while here I expect a string, which is the concatenated values of all the phones. To concatenate all the array elements with a separator inside Power Automate, we use a function called join. I open the bracket, so as the first parameter, it's expecting a collection or an array, comma. Second parameter is a delimiter. Let's assume that we want to separate them by forward slash. So single quote, I put forward slash, and I close it. So it will be the concatenated phone numbers. Each one of them is selected by a forward slash. I can even make it better and include a space in between them. So let me click on OK, save. So let me just take a copy of it completely. Copy. Initialize invoices object. So I clicked on it. Let's wait for it to expand. So again, I select all of it, delete, and I paste the new values that now it contains the phone numbers. And just like before, I scroll up to the top of the page, close this. We're all good, and we have phone numbers here. Oh gosh, it takes a lot of time to process this. I click on save, and let's test it this time. Test, run flow, and done. Now if I expand the create CSV table, in the output, and if I go to the end of it, you see for the one record that actually we have a combination of phone numbers, these values are here. And if you want to send it to SharePoint, it's very simple. Just add a new step, use create file, and you can create a file directly inside SharePoint. Let me just pick up one website, for example, Power Automate Workshop. For the folder path, I can click on the folder. I go to Share Documents, just click on it, and I want to put it in the root of Share Documents. I give it a name. I say test invoices.csv, and file content is coming from the create CSV table, which is the create CSV table output. Save. And now we can actually see how it works. Test, continue, and run flow. Done. Completed. Now let's go to SharePoint. Inside SharePoint, I click on Documents, and you will see the test invoices CSV. And if I click on it, you will see all these fields here. Of course, it's not formatted because it's CSV, but everything is here, even the contact ID and contact phone for this one single one. And that's it. And I seriously think this video deserves a like. Please don't hesitate and push that like button. Okay, seems like we are done, but the reality is that no, we aren't. The process of this video was mainly based on the fact that you are quite comfortable working with JSON and expressions, and I tried to avoid visual content or visual actions as much as possible and tried to use the minimum number of actions to move this forward. There is a reason behind it, but I really don't want to get there. In case you want to see how I would have done that with visual actions, like, for example, parse JSON or join action or things like that, let me know in the comments, and maybe in the next video, I put that together and I will show you how you can do it with not so much of coding. Thank you for watching. If you are not a subscriber, you may consider subscribing so that you won't miss the next video. And if you already like the video, thank you so much. Take care and stay tuned till the next video.